information literacy and digital literacy. We have speakers from Miami University in the United States of America who will speak about their experiences at that university. The speakers will be Katie Gibson, Jeannie Bome. I hope that I'm pronouncing your surname and name right. Roger Justus and Stephanie Hillis. Their presentation will be based on a paper they recently presented at the IFLAC Congress in Rotterdam. That's where I met them, and I thought their presentation was quite interesting, and it's something that needs to be shared, widely. And they were willing to actually share. Just to indicate that the colleagues at Miami University are controlling everything in terms of the platform that we are using. So if there are any challenges, you can just blame them because it would have been their fault. We'll give them 30 to 45 minutes to present before opening for questions and discussions. Please feel free to type your questions while they are presenting. If you have any, questions that you might have, they will respond at the end of the session. That is after their presentation. Unfortunately, we don't have registrations, so I was worried that we'll speak to ourselves. But I see that, the numbers are picking up. We're already on 77, so which means, at least people are joining. Presenters, I hope you are ready because I want to give the platform to you now to start your presentation. Thank you. It will be up to you as to how we are going to do it. I know that you are four. Whoever starts can start and you do, however I want to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Give me a thumb. All right, good. So
Yes.
It's perfect. It's good morning from me and my colleagues. It's currently 8:15 in the morning over here, but it's good afternoon to all of our wonderful attendees from the opposite side of the globe. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We are so excited to be able to have this opportunity to share our work with you. And we would first like to extend a wholehearted thank you to Stellenbosch University and to the LIASA for hosting us today. We are 4 librarians from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, not Florida, common misconception. But we are all members of our university's, our libraries, our reference and instruction department, sorry, 8 in the morning. Together, we are sort of like an interdisciplinary Captain Planet, if you're familiar with that cartoon. With our powers combined, we cover most subject areas. I'm Jenny Boehm, and I'm a science librarian. I'm primarily a subject liaison for the life and the health sciences, but I also have some functional responsibilities, like serving on our library's systematic review and evidence synthesis consultation team. And I also have some minimal data responsibilities. Katie Gibson is a humanities and social sciences librarian. She primarily covers foreign languages and global and intercultural studies, and she is also the library's accessibility expert and coordinator. Stephanie Hillis is an art historian by training and is our subject liaison for all of our fine arts department's Safe Music, as well as architecture, interior design, and theater. She also works fairly closely with our makerspace and does a lot with art and maker-focused instruction and outreach. And finally, we have Roger Justus. He is first and foremost a data librarian, and he also has some minimal subject responsibilities for mathematics, physics, computer science and engineering, as well as geographic information systems. With that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Roger to get us started on the meat of our presentation.
Jenny, thank you so much for doing those introductions, and hello everyone, and hope you're having a good day. We're going to start with the project overview first and just give you a little background on it. So our project came out of a call for resources from our university's Writing Center this spring in response to the growing realization that not only artificial intelligence was here to stay, but that students were actively using artificial intelligence to help with their research and classwork. Recognizing that instructors would need resources to help manage this new reality, the Writing Center organized 3 faculty learning committees, which we were a part of, to work together and try to strategize ways to best methods and practices for dealing with this new reality. Our goal was for the groups to develop materials and strategies for faculty to help them understand AI, the implications of its use, and how they could better use the technology in their classrooms. Our group obviously represented the library, and we took the path of looking at through the prism of visual and information literacy with the following goals. How do we create writing and research assignments that encourage our students to critically engage with information? How can we harness these tools to create deeper learning instead of just futilely trying to outright ban their use? How should librarians and other teaching faculty approach information literacy and digital literacy when these AI tools are becoming more commonplace and comprehensive? To meet these goals, we designed 6 lesson plans, evenly divided between visual and information literacy. Each plan was designed not only to provide background for the associated frame, but also to give instructors a starting point in using these AI tools to help develop critical thinking skills in their teaching. Before we get too far down the road, I think it might be good at this point to talk about the AI tools we used. We used tools like ChatGPT, DALL-E 2, and Midjourney, as these tools have been the forefront of public discussion of AI and are often the focus of discussion here at the university as their use for both the students and the faculty. ChatGPT was the main tool used for the information literacy-based plans. It was released in 2022 in November and uses the learning model called reinforcement learning from human feedback to take a data set and refine the responses based on the feedback from human trainers, allowing the AI to communicate in a natural language manner. This, while allowing the program to generate responses, also has limitations, such as learning from the human rather than the model and data, reuse and repetition of phrases, and limitations around the data set, which for ChatGPT, when we made these lesson plans, only went to September 2021. We had access to both the free ChatGPT 3.5 along with a paid version of ChatGPT Plus. For the visual literacy plans, AI image generators like DALL-E and Midjourney were used to help develop the plans. These are AI systems that can create realistic images and art from a description in a natural language. This text-to-image model combines the language model, such as used in ChatGPT, with a generative model to produce images based on the prompts entered. Both models were trained using text and data images scraped from the web in a manner similar to that of ChatGPT. Jenny now will talk a little bit about the background of the information literacy framework.
Before I move back into that, I do want to cover the overall structure of the lesson plans. There we go. Sorry. All 6 of our plans are designed with the same structure. They each start with an introduction that discusses the main frames or threshold concepts that the plans are intended to cover. This is followed by the learning objectives and then an outline of the activity. 2 of the lessons are focused on specific disciplines, while the others are more flexible to allow for application in a wide variety of courses and levels. Each lesson plan has clear example prompts, which are also open to customization, and each has teaching notes with our recommendations for classroom implementation. All of the activities are designed to be done in person with faculty-led reflection and discussion, but they can easily be adapted into online modules or even a flipped classroom model if preferred. For those who are interested, we will have a QR code at the end of our slides that can be used to access our materials. Next slide, please. And so before we go into too much detail about the 3 information literacy lesson plans, I do want to give a brief overview of the standards that we used to base the plans around. The framework for information literacy in higher education was adopted in 2016 by the Association of College and Research Libraries, or ACRL for short. This framework strives to provide a set of core ideas for use in developing materials and connecting information literacy across the total curricula of the university. The QR code on this slide has the full framework in case anyone is interested in accessing it, but in brief, there are 6 frames covering different concepts in information literacy, and each of them has the ability to be interconnected to the others. The frames are listed on this slide. The framework was created to be discipline agnostic, and each frame is divided into knowledge practices and dispositions. Knowledge practices being ways students can demonstrate their learning, and dispositions being the attitudes or values that students are expected to have. Next slide, please. For the information literacy framework, we decided to initially focus on 3 of the 6 frames. The frame research as inquiry is based on the idea that research is iterative and requires enough of an understanding of a topic to enable you to find knowledge gaps and ask new and increasingly complex questions based on those gaps. Scholarship as conversation asserts that research is not done in a vacuum, and that all types of scholarly discourse are, in fact, a form of conversation in which different and new discoveries, perspectives, and interpretations are weighed against each other across time. Searching as strategic exploration focuses on searching and retrieval of different kinds of information and recognizes that this entire process is highly contextualized depending on different qualities, aspects, and experiences of both the searcher and the various sources of information being interrogated. Each of these three focal frames were directly tied to the learning objectives for each of our lesson plans. The three remaining frames on the slide were considered auxiliary and were incorporated as each of us felt was appropriate. I can now pass it back over to Roger to talk about his lesson plan.
Thanks, Jenny. So the first lesson plan is research and inquiry. For research and inquiry, the activity is based about refining and reiterating research questions based on new and existing knowledge. The lesson plan focuses on the iterative process of asking a question and then using this knowledge to refine or reformulate the question. Students are provided a prompt to feed into ChatGPT or one that's already been provided for them, and then are asked to revise the prompt and look at the information that ChatGPT has given back as information. Example prompts were developed for computer, science, astronomy, and math education for this lesson plan. The learning outcomes for this lesson plan are shown here. They gave guidance to the teacher on working with students to develop better skills in the formulation of questions for research and the process of how to ask questions that would better promote understanding of the issues that they're being researched and further areas that could come out of that research that they're doing. As you can see from the lesson plans, it tried to cover every element of the stuff that ChatGPT was putting out. By looking at what ChatGPT generates, starting with a simple prompt, and then using the results to refine the question of the prompts, the students were able to find out if the sources being used and if what ChatGPT was being put out was coming out was being better. While example prompts were for science and engineering focused lessons in this lesson plan set, prompts for other subjects could also be used for this plan, with only a few changes. Just remember to keep the initial prompt simple so that students can revise and reflect on how they can make it better. To give you a better idea of how this looked, let's look at one of the examples. So for computer programming, we had a pre-generated code. We asked ChatGPT to provide some code for creating a bar chart in the Python programming language. ChatGPT would then provide this. This is an example of the output from ChatGPT. This could be given to the students so that they could then run this code in their own Python program and see if the program worked, if it gave any errors or anything else. It was a way that students could evaluate the information that ChatGPT was coming out with and further refine their question. Students then, after reviewing the codes with their friends or other classmates, would ask if maybe there was a better way to ask the prompt for ChatGPT. It was also gave a better understanding of how ChatGPT looked at this stuff. It gave the questions that we asked the learners were, what was the initial prompt that we gave the system? Was the code generated correct? Did it run without any errors? If there were errors, what was needed to correct them? And could you have asked a better initial question to get a better answer with fewer errors? You can also incorporate other frames from the ACRL into this. One example would be authority is constructed, discussing how the LLMs and other AIs evaluate sources. If the code isn't correct, for example, where did the AI get the code? And why did it think it was right? Why did it give you that answer? Also, who provided that answer to the AI for them to give it to you in the first place? Looking at how to create and modify prompts for these systems also gives a lead into conversations around information as creation as a process and scholarship as a conversation. Speaking of scholarship as a conversation, we'll now turn it over to Katie to talk about her lesson plan.
Hello all. Frame I worked with, scholarship with conversation. Go ahead to the next slide, please. I wanted students to engage with the scholarly discourse and conventions in their specific disciplines. This includes that a student would need to seek out and correctly attribute previous perspectives and research the context for the particular issue that they're researching. And then the contribution made to the scholarly conversation should be appropriate for the audience, the setting, etc. I also ended up weaving in 2 related frames, that information has value and that authority is constructed. Information systems privilege authoritative voices and that authority is constructed. And to quote the framework, various communities may recognize different types of authority. Some communities and scholars are underrepresented or entirely marginalized in academic discourse, and this can be carried over into the databases used to build these large language models, reinforcing existing bias and inequities. Slide. So my learning outcomes, oops, those are the related frames, sorry, one more slide. The learning outcomes are what you see here. Students will first engage with the conventions in their own discipline and then will critically examine how well ChatGPT is able to replicate those conventions. And then they will examine the larger context of language models and whether they perpetuate existing biases in the scholarly conversation. This is designed to be for students in an introductory course or like the first course in a major that all students would need to take, like a research methods, for example. Next slide. My lesson plan is in 2 parts, which can happen in the same class session or in separate class sessions as needed, depending on time. The first, like I said, is where students will engage with the conventions of their own discipline by examining either a class reading, a seminal article in their field, or some other exemplary piece of writing to come up with a list of how do people communicate in that particular discipline. So for example, how do historians communicate their findings to other historians? So basically, it's a guided discussion of what does a discipline scholarly work look like. Next slide. Part 2 has the instructor introduce large language models and explain how they work. They'll generate text using ChatGPT about the same topic as the article selected in the first part. So for example, if an instructor gave students a research article on the political context depicted in the novel 100 Years of Solitude that cites sources in MLA, that is what they would ask ChatGPT to generate. Then they'll compare what ChatGPT generated against the list of conventions for a discipline that the students brainstormed in part 1 and revisit their discussion about ways in which systems can perpetuate bias, both in like the scholarly publishing system, but also within ChatGPT itself. So the goal is to get students to examine word prediction tools like ChatGPT, what can they add to a scholarly conversation, but also the value that they as students can bring to that conversation as well as researchers in the field themselves. Thank you. And I think now is it Ginny?
Yes. Searching as strategic exploration is the last of the 3 focal frames that we covered. Next slide, please. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, and as is hopefully apparent from the frame's title, this one covers all aspects of searching, as well as retrieval of information, and particularly how searching is affected by the overall context of both the searcher and the information need. I want to highlight this excerpt from the framework. Searching for information is often nonlinear and iterative. Expert searchers realize that information searching is a contextualized, complex experience that affects and is affected by the cognitive, affective, and social dimensions of the searcher. Next slide, please. This idea of searching as iterative and contextualized is at the core of this particular lesson plan. We want students to be able to recognize that different research databases categorize their information in similar but distinct ways, so they can better understand how to generate proper search terms. We also want them to explore how GPTs like ChatGPT are trained to generate responses, so they can understand where the gaps might be when asking the AI to provide search terms. And finally, we want them to be able to critically evaluate 2 different strategies for generating search terms, those strategies being human-created keyword lists and AI-created keyword lists. Next slide, please. And here you can see the overall lesson plan for this frame. It starts with some instructor-led discussion of what exactly generative pre-trained transformers like ChatGPT are and how they work, and then moves to a similar overview of research databases and how they store information. Then it transitions into an activity where students are split into groups and given a sample research topic. Half the class is asked to create a human-generated set of keywords where the students would be allowed to use whatever background research they want or need in order to get a better understanding of the topic. Google, Wikipedia, things like that. The other half of the class is asked to use ChatGPT to generate a keyword list. Once the groups are done, the students have the opportunity to compare and contrast the keywords that each approach generated, as well as the overall processes that they used. There's likely to be some additional discussion here about why they can't just ask ChatGPT to generate a list of references for them, so they don't have to bother with keywords in the first place, which should allow the instructor to address the problem of confabulation, which is when the AI creates false information, like fake citations that seem plausible on the surface, but are in reality completely fabricated. After the keyword generation activity, students will have the opportunity to search a relevant research database using each list and compare the results. The lesson wraps up with another discussion about which approach students prefer, as well as the pros and cons of each strategy. Next slide, please. As time allows, there are several opportunities to bring in concepts from other frames for additional discussion. The concept of an authority is an extremely important one in relation to generative AI tools. Companies are not at all transparent about where they obtain the materials for their training data sets, which leaves wide open the question of where they obtain the materials for these, leaving wide open the question of whose voices are being represented. There are lots of publications and news stories that show a very heavy bias in ChatGPT toward Western voices, toward white voices, toward male voices. The majority of the world does not have all of these characteristics, and there's a huge swath of the global population that's just not represented. There's also the question of what exactly authority means in the context of AI tools. Can a machine actually be an authority? The way that AI tools create information is also ripe for discussion. Most students don't seem to fully realize that the tools don't actually know anything. They just generate one word at a time based on probabilities of what might come next based on the prompt. This can lead to further discussions of the ethical use of AI-generated information in research. Is it ever ethical to use such information? If so, how? In what contexts? When's it okay, if it ever is? And finally, there's the opportunity to address AI-generated information as part of the so-called scholarly conversation. The currency of the training data set, which, if you remember, includes virtually no information from the past 2 years, this is problematic for a lot of fields, particularly those that move quickly, like computer science and medicine. This could lead very easily back to that discussion of confabulation that I described earlier. As you can see, there's a lot of flexibility in the application of this lesson. Instructors can go in several different directions depending on the interest or the level of the students. Next slide, please. And here is an example of a ChatGPT prompt that's included in the lesson. Please create a list of keywords that I might use to find research articles on the topic, whatever your topic is. It's very flexible. And if you go to the next slide, this is what ChatGPT came up with when I asked it. Next slide, please. This is what it came up with when I asked a few months ago to give me some keywords related to ovarectomy. I'm a life science librarian. This is a really common topic in my physiology classes. But if you can, as you can see, ChatGPT has interpreted what it thinks I want, but the information it's given is not correct. it's trying to tell me that ovurectomy is not a correct term, and then I should actually use oophorectomy. Oophorectomy would be the correct term if I was researching this procedure in humans. But this prompt was inspired by model studies in lab animals like rats and mice, where the term ovurectomy actually is correct. It's the preferred term. So if I were using this lesson plan with my physiology students, I would have a fantastic opportunity to talk with them about all the things I just described and not to just blindly trust the machine. Obviously, not every topic will have such a clear-cut opportunity to discuss errors in the responses, but if you're careful and intentional and test your prompts before you get to actually using the lesson, you should be able to find an easy way to address similar issues and considerations with using AI tools. And now I think it is finally Stephanie's turn to talk about visual literacy.
Hello, everyone. So hi, this is Stephanie. And as Miami's Art and Architecture librarian, I took on the task of developing lesson plans for visual literacy using the ACRL framework for visual literacy in higher education. Slide. Today, I will be sharing 2 of the 3 lesson plans designed to engage students with the framework for visual literacy in or through AI image generators like DALL-E and Midjourney. These lessons are intended for more advanced library students who are already familiar with searching strategies. The first lesson asks students to consider copyright in relation to AI image generators, and the second helps students understand how bias in the AI image generators data sets influence the content they generate. Lesson plans are designed to fit into a 1 hour and 20-minute class period, and all learning objectives are taken from the knowledge practices and dispositions identified in the framework for visual literacy. Each of the knowledge practices and dispositions is also crosswalked to its related frames from the ACRL framework for information literacy. Slide. So let's begin with a brief overview of the ACRL framework for visual literacy in higher education. The Framework for Visual Literacy is a companion document to the Framework for Information Literacy, published in 2022 by the ACRL Visual Literacy Standards Task Force. It supersedes the previous ACRL Visual Literacy Competency Standards for Higher Education, published in 2011. The Framework for Visual Literacy identifies 4 emerging themes. Learners participate in a changing visual information landscape. Learners perceive visuals as communicating information. Learners practice visual discernment and criticality. And learners pursue social justice through visual practice. You can see the complete framework by using the QR code on the slide. And also, next slide. The 4th theme, learners pursue social justice through visual practice, was added in response to criticisms that the Framework for Information Literacy lacks a specific social justice frame. As you will see throughout my part of the presentation, the authors of the Framework for Visual Literacy have woven social justice throughout the document because, quote, social justice should not be siloed as a discrete entity for visual literacy learning, end quote. Slide. As with the frames for the Framework for Information Literacy, the 4 themes of the Framework for Visual Literacy are subdivided into knowledge practices and dispositions. These knowledge practices and dispositions are then crosswalked to the frames in the Framework for Information Literacy. It should be noted that knowledge practices and dispositions can be crosswalked to more than one frame. For example, the knowledge practice, examine visuals for signs of alteration, such as cropping or use of digital filters, and consider the intent and consequences of any changes made, is crosswalked to authority as constructed and contextual, and information creation as a process. Slide. Knowledge practices and dispositions are also crosswalked to social justice. For example, the disposition prioritize ethical considerations for cultural and intellectual property when creating, sharing, or using visuals is crosswalked to information creation as a process, information has value, and social justice. Knowledge practices and dispositions that fall under the social justice theme, learners pursue social justice through visual practice, are all found somewhere in the previous 3 themes to demonstrate that social justice is inherent to all parts of visual literacy. For example, the aforementioned disposition, prioritize ethical considerations for cultural and intellectual property when creating, sharing, or using visuals, can be found under both the learners participate in a changing visual information landscape theme and the learners pursue social justice through visual practice theme. Slide. So we will begin with the AI image generators and copyright lesson plan, which addresses the themes seen here. Learners participate in a changing visual information landscape, and learners perceive visuals as communicating information. Slide. On this slide, you see the learning outcomes of the lesson. Students will research and discuss various AI image generators copyright policies in order to prioritize ethical considerations for cultural and intellectual property when creating, sharing, or using visuals, which crosswalks to information creation as a process, information has value, and social justice. And realize that visuals in all formats are works of intellectual property, which crosswalks to information has value. Slide. And here you have the detailed lesson plan. So the instructor begins by introducing the lesson to students, telling them that in groups of 3 to 4, they will research how various AI image generators handle copyright using the AI image generators website, Google, and library databases. Each group is assigned a different AI image generator, for example, DALL-E, Midjourney, or Stability AI, and asked to focus on the questions seen here. Who owns the copyright to an image generated by the AI image generator? And do you find any sources that indicate that there are complications to how the AI image generator handles copyright permissions? And what are these complications? Groups then research these questions for 20 minutes before sharing their findings with the class during a 5-minute presentation. Slide. After the presentation, students engage in a class-wide discussion based on these questions. How do the various AI image generators compare and contrast in how they handle copyright? Which AI image generator has the best copyright for users? Why? Which AI image generator has the worst copyright for users? Why? What does it mean if you don't find any information on copyright in your AI image generator? And why might this be problematic? Would you hesitate to use any of these tools based on how they handle copyright? Why or why not? And finally, where did you find the best information about AI image generators and copyright, and why do you think that is? Slide. After this discussion, based on students' presentation content, the instructor informs students of additional copyright considerations when using AI image generators, telling them that AI copyright laws are still being decided by the courts. One of the main issues, at least in the US, is that according to the US Copyright Office, copyright requires human authorship. You might remember the case where a monkey took a selfie and the courts ruled that the image was fair use since the image was not created by a human. Similarly, author Chris Kashtova used Midjourney to illustrate her graphic novel, Zarya of the Dawn. The US Copyright Office ruled that while she owns the copyright to the written text and the sequence of images in the novel, she does not own the copyright to the individual images made by Midjourney. Another issue is how AI image generators acquired their data sets. AI image generators are trained on images scraped from the internet, which means that artist images were used in the data set without the artist's consent. For example, Getty Images is suing Stability AI for using Getty Images in the AI's data set without permission, and a group of artists is currently suing Midjourney for using their work in the data set without their consent. Slide. Once students are aware of these issues, the instructor leads a wrapped-up discussion asking students, knowing what you know now, would you hesitate to use any of these tools based on how they handle copyright? Why or why not? Would you care if images you created had been used in the data set? Why or why not? And should people be able to own the copyright to an image generated by AI? Why or why not? Slide. The second lesson plan is similar to the first. Both ask student groups to research and report their findings to the class. However, in the second lesson, students focus on bias in AI image generator datasets instead of copyright. This lesson plan addresses the social justice theme. Learners pursue social justice through visual practice. Slide. On this slide, you see the learning outcomes for the lesson. Students will research and discuss the data sets of various AI image generators, paying particular attention to information about policies to mitigate bias and bias in the data set in order to acknowledge that no platform is neutral and that concealed factors like suggestion algorithms and power structures within the publishing industry shape experiences with visuals, which crosswalks to authority is constructed and contextual, information has value, and social justice. And anticipate the ways in which algorithms, social media, and participatory technologies obscure or promote visuals and visual media generators, which may reflect commercial interests and reinforce existing social dynamics, which crosswalks to authority is constructed and contextual, information has value, and social justice. Slide. Here you can see the detailed lesson plan. First, the instructor introduces the activity, and then in groups of 3 to 4, students research how various AI image generators handle bias in the data set, again, using the AI image generators website, Google, and library databases. Each group is assigned a different AI image generator and asked to focus on the questions seen here. Does the AI image generator acknowledge bias in the data set? If so, what biases are present? If not, can you find other sources that discuss bias in the AI image generator's data set? What are the biases? What are the consequences of bias in the data set? This can either be information you found during your research or additional consequences you consider based on your research. Does an AI image generator attempt to thwart bias in the data set? If so, how? Are there other rules and or regulations and or restrictions in your AI image generators data set? What else did you learn about the data set? Why is it important to consider the data set used by an AI image generator? And then finally, where did you find the best information about AI image generators and bias in the data set? And why do you think that is? Slide. Student groups are then given 25 minutes to research these questions, after which they have 5 minutes to present their findings to the class. After the presentation, the instructor leads a class-wide discussion using the questions seen here. How do the various AI image generators compare and contrast in the bias inherent in their data sets? How do the various AI image generators compare and contrast in how they handle bias in the data set? Which AI image generator takes the most steps to limit bias in the data set? And can you think of other ways that AI image generators could limit or mitigate bias in their data sets? Slide. So thank you. Those are the lesson plans we wanted to share with you today. I think I can speak for all of us when I say that we are really looking forward to your questions. That said, we do want to address a few that I did see come up in chat, but we will address them now as well before we get started. Slide, please. So yes, we are happy to share our lesson plans with you. You can download them using the QR code that you currently see on the slide, and a recording of this presentation will also be made available.
Wow, thank you so much, colleagues. Perhaps the correct approach, I'm not sure if you have the names and the email addresses of everybody that has joined. If not, then I will ask Kirchner to just put his his email address so that they can send, a request to his email. If that's fine with you, Kirchner.
I did turn on registration for the
Yes, I
meeting,
saw
so I
that,
should
yeah.
have everyone's email addresses.
Okay, so if you can just send them to us, then we'll just forward the recording to everybody.
Okay,
So
I can
to
do that.
indicate if you don't want the recording, we'll send it to everybody. But of course, if somebody doesn't want it, just indicate so that we don't send it to you. You can send an email to Kirchner if you don't want the recording. Okay. Thank you so much, colleagues. I must say that when at IFLA, for me, I attended about 12, I think, presentations, to do with AI. And for me, this was the best Hence, I thought it was important that it be shared with the colleagues, in South Africa as well, even those who didn't attend IFLA. I particularly like the grounding, of it to existing frameworks, so that, we can see that there are convergences, between the various literacies. You don't necessarily need to have an AI literacy, session that is a standalone. You can also incorporate it, within your information literacy session. Having said that, I'll open the floor for any questions that colleagues may have. Do we have any questions, colleagues? I'm not sure if they're able to ask, or shall they ask only on the chat?
People should be able to unmute and ask their question
Okay.
if they would like, or if
Yeah,
they
you
prefer to
can
put it
unmute or
into
you
the
can use
chat.
the chat. Yes, yeah. So I'm just opening the floor now, colleagues.
Can you hear me? This is Cecilia Walter. I would like to ask a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I mean, I was astounded, though I had an idea of how much work for lecturers and for librarians to understand how AI affects teaching and learning, and also bringing in that understanding and incorporating it into teaching and learning students, and working for a small higher educational institution. I'm just wondering how much involves the librarians and how much involves the lecturers, and how to ensure cooperation and understanding between the two, and to provide support for students. Because it seems to me very much, being a very old school librarian myself, who came through print before digital, and now I've got as far as AI. A lot of the things that have been covered in the program in some way were covered in my non-digital education as a student a long time ago. Not quite when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, but a little bit later than that. And it seems to me very much that the introduction of AI is, despite all the burden and the complications, provides an opportunity to give students, and for students to share with each other and with the librarians and the lecturers, an understanding of how the world of scholarship and learning works. Because I think people will do what they will do, and people will always find shortcuts. But it's also important, I think, for students to have this understanding going forward, particularly as we are in a world where there is so much disinformation, misinformation, and outright lies. And it makes you wonder, and this is where your frequent reference to authority is so important, to how to establish what is true in inverted commas. And I use that, not that I don't believe in truth, but I don't believe it in a way as something just abstract. I mean, I can look out my window here and I can see the sun shining because we're in spring. So I know it's spring because I know various things, but dealing with literature, can be much more complicated. Sorry, I've wrapped that up in a rather long speech.
Thank you so much, Celia. I didn't expect to hear your voice. When I joined UCT, that was my first job, 2003. Celia was my colleague. I learned a lot from her. Now she's retired. Sorry, I'm now digressing. So any responses, colleagues? But thank you, Celia. I'm very happy to hear your voice. I've not seen you for a long time. Go ahead, colleagues.
And I'm very happy to see how well you're doing.
Okay, thanks.
I think working with the faculty learning groups down in the Writing Center, we worked with other members of faculty, lecturers, and things like that. And I think that was an important part of trying to get everybody involved in answering these problems and these questions. And I think that was one of the major steps towards doing that. So,
And if your university is not doing that, I think the library is a logical place where librarians could organize workshops or collaborative spaces to have these kind of discussions. Just bring the faculty in and see where they're at and what are they teaching with their students, what are they seeing. Opening up opportunities for conversation is beneficial.
Okay. Are you happy with that response, Celia?
Yes,
Then-
I mean, I'd like to follow up from Teresa's comment. Teresa is my colleague. That you've really given us a plan to follow and adapt as our circumstances, and which of course are evolving and changing. You know, and as I said, I'd like to once again iterate. I think one of the things that kind of gets sort of hidden under the carpet is this question of authority. And I don't think, you know, it's not mentioned, and I think it's important that this is incorporated upfront.
Yes,
Okay, I think that was a comment. Okay, you can respond.
Sorry. I would definitely agree with that, and that's one of the big reasons that I really agree with Roger and Katie with what they said. There was another question earlier in chat, you know, how do researcher students know what can be used and not with all the disinformation? This is one of the big reasons that I think it's really, really important to make sure that the professors, that the lecturers have an understanding as well as the students of what these tools are and how they work. I mean, I don't know if anyone has been paying attention to any of the scholarly communications news, particularly out of the US lately. There have been many instances of people using AI text generators to write peer-reviewed papers that managed to get through peer review, or that were submitted as part of grant applications that they literally just copied and pasted and left some of those really obvious telltale clues. And so I think getting our professors, getting our researchers, before we get the students, getting the researchers to understand, you know, a lot of the ethics around this, to be able to recognize, I mean, they're the experts in their fields. They're going to be able to recognize, in theory, when the AI is making something up on a particular topic. And so I think, you know, this is one of those train the trainer sort of situations. We really need to make sure that our faculty have an understanding, so that they can help us with the students, to make sure that they have an understanding and can use it ethically as well.
Yes, I wonder if you read, there's another question by Denise Nicholson. Do you see it, or shall I read?
it's in the chat, right? Is that the one you're referring
Yes,
to?
it's in the
Okay,
chat,
just to
yes.
make sure.
Yeah.
Stephanie, I'm going to leave that
Yeah,
copyright
that
one
may
Yeah,
be
I
to
was like,
you.
I think that one's me. So I don't find that copyright has been any set. Okay, so like a lot of these AI tools actually say, like DALL-E says that if I make an image and not DALL-E, I own the copyright. So that's what DALL-E says, but then the courts say that I don't own the copyright. So it's not, I think, so much that copyright is a barrier. It's like there's no barrier to it right now. It's kind of the complete opposite. So you know, if I generated an image and put it on a t-shirt, Ginny could totally steal it from me and make it into more t-shirts and like sell them cheaper than me, and I would have no legal case that was my copyrighted image. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
And I think
Yes.
too, it's important to remember that's US copyright law and not international. So there may be differences depending on the country as well.
Yeah, I'm sure Denise is a guru for copyright here in South Africa. She will definitely know what it says here. Perhaps she can advise. Maybe before we go to her second question, that's Denise, let's go to Teresa's one. It says, I really like your detailed lesson plans. I'm sure you can see, and it did the integration of AI into your overall information literacy programs. Do you think that your lessons plans and the way you have tailored them affect students' ethical AI usage, especially after they've engaged in numerous interesting practical exercises that you provide? If you
I
didn't
only have
understand, because
anecdotal
I know that
evidence.
there might be an accent issue here. Maybe you can
Oh, you're
just
fine.
read.
No, you're good.
Oh,
I'm just
okay.
thinking about it. I only have anecdotal evidence. I don't have any because we created these through the summer. This is the first semester where they're available for use. So we don't know yet what the outcomes are, if and how widely they're being used. But I have had a few faculty members come to my office and say how they, hey, you're on that group. Can we talk about AI? I've seen students using it in these ways, and I've had to give zeros on assignments because of unethical use. But I was walking out on campus and I heard students saying that they were using ChatGPT to write an essay and discovered it was so bad they just wrote the essay themselves. So I think to a certain extent they're starting to figure it out on their own, completely based on one conversation I overheard. But I think that's something that we need to continue to work on, getting it incorporated into the departments we work with. I think we're at the beginning of that part right now.
Thank you. If you can respond to Dennis' second question, it says for the same prompt done over and over, a new response is generated, but as I understand, they are not saved anyway. So how can students use the outcome of their prompts in their research reports if they are not accessible or findable or cited?
Right. And this is one of the really big issues with ChatGPT. And I think this also, I can probably answer one of your other questions, Denise, about how does one avoid plagiarism when using AI, which doesn't have references or true references. And I think really the way to overcome it is to recognize that it's a tool, it's not the final writer. Like you should not be using AI to write any part of your paper. Like it could be helpful to use it to generate ideas. Give me an outline for something, for a paper on this topic or something. That could be helpful to get students to kind of prompt the tool to give them ideas for where to go. But if students, or honestly researchers, are trying to copy and paste any part of ChatGPT's output into a paper, that is plagiarism. That should not be happening. It's a research assistant. It's not a writer. And I think that's how we really need to frame it, is this is just a tool to help you, just like Google is now a tool to help us with background research, right? It can help with a starting point. It should not be used anywhere towards the end of any finished product.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't see any more questions.
We had one question
one
from
question.
Betsy.
Oh, okay.
Do you have a
Okay.
separate lesson
Oh,
plan
yeah.
in
Oh, yeah.
which we
That's
train
true. That's
students how
true.
to use
Yeah.
GPT?
Sorry, I was busy. Yeah.
That's okay. Not specifically. I don't think any of our lessons train them specifically in ChatGPT. I think a lot of ours do discuss how it works, to introduce them to here's how it functions, and how you might use it. Some I think you could, in that process, have it up on a screen during your class session to show them what the interface looks like, what's the generation look like. But we've been talking about information ethics, and one of the recommendations we made in our IFLA presentation is don't require students to have a ChatGPT account, because there are so many information ethics questions. Is it right that we are paying ChatGPT to get an account to train their AI for them so that they can make money? So that is it's not, that doesn't specifically, there's not a separate lesson plan, but it's a little bit woven into the others. And then the question about were there for a particular level, mine was for an introductory level, sort of beginning first year, second year students.
Mhm.
I don't know for other
Yeah, I
folks what
think
yours were geared toward.
Mine were similar. It was for introduction classes, at least where we were at. I think Stephanie's were for a little more advanced.
Yeah, they would have to be like fairly skilled searchers, I think, to kind of find some of the answers to the questions that I asked. So would not be a good time to like be introducing keywords and how to search those types of things. I would expect that they already have those skills so that they could do my lessons.
He has also amended this question: were there any formal assessment attached to the lessons?
We
Not
did have
not
assessment
grading.
recommendations as part of the lesson plans.
Okay. There is Mabundu say, would you say that some AIs are worse than others in terms of dealing with biases and prejudices embedded in the data sets they use? Is there any way of going around this? I think that would be the last question, colleagues.
I mean, ChatGPT isn't great, but I think some of the art ones do take steps to at least address. Some of them do. Stephanie can speak more to that.
Yeah, so like if you were to compare DALL-E and Midjourney, Midjourney is kind of like a free-for-all. I don't know. Yeah, you can kind of do a lot of things in Midjourney that you cannot do in DALL-E. For example, DALL-E won't, like, if I typed in Obama riding a unicorn as my image prompt in DALL-E, and because it's a famous person, DALL-E will not generate the image. Midjourney has no problem giving me the image of of Obama riding a unicorn. So there are those kind of things. DALL-E does take steps to mitigate bias in the actual search strings on the back end. So if I typed in CEO, on the back end to kind of give me more diverse results, DALL-E will put in female CEO, Black CEO, Asian CEO, so that I get, right, not just white male CEO. So there are these kind of like steps that some of them have put in, like DALL-E, whereas Midjourney seems to have less. As I said, it seems to be more of a free-for-all over at Midjourney.
Okay. Maybe you can just read your response there, Katie. That would be from Dennis' question. That would be the last one for Rian.
Okay. Text and data mining, how do text and data mining differ from AI scraping of copyrighted works and AI tools? In a certain way, they're very similar in the data is being scraped. For data mining, there is a human interpreting the end result rather than whatever is spit out as given as truth. Or, but also most data sets used in data mining are obtained by purchase or by license, or the creators in some way have, or it's something in the public domain. So in some way, the creators of those works have given their works over to that, if that makes sense. There's legal channels for those things to be obtained rather than indiscriminate scraping without the creator's permissions.
And I'll also say a lot of the publishers now are offering their own tools for doing that, Elsevier and others. So
Mhm. Okay, thank you so much. That was a fascinating discussion, even after the presentation itself. Yeah, I'll give Jeremiah the platform to do a vote of thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone. So, yeah, firstly, thank you to the speakers who woke up at the crack of dawn to be awake and present for 8 a.m. or 8:15 a.m. webinar. So thanks, Jenny, Katie, Stephanie, and Roger for that. Thank you, Saviwe, for reaching out to them to give us also the opportunity in South Africa to engage around these issues. And then I think the last thanks, to be quick and short about it, is to the audience. Thank you very much for coming. So glad to see so many familiar names from around South Africa. And thank you for the engagement. I think this is, it's so wonderful to see actual tools. I think for the past year, many conferences have dealt with AI, but sort of in an abstract way, more conceptually. And I think now we've got something to work with. So thank you for your time and for your efforts, and for being willing to share your expertise with us, and for your contact information for hopefully lots of future engagements.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you very much for having us. It's been a pleasure.
thanks, folks. Appreciate your time.
Okay, bye, colleagues.
Echoing, thanks. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, I think.